Hello everyone, this is Eerie Knight of the Pseudoposse and welcome to my first look at Aska, a Viking colony management survival game. The game was playable as a demo during the Survival Craft Festival and will be again in the upcoming Steam Next Festival. Let's get this party started with the most important decision we have to make. What color is our hair? Yes, that is clearly it. As we set out on our adventure, we learned that the gods gave us everything. We took it for granted. They punished us, as humans do. Their wrath drove us onto the high seas where we find ourselves shipwrecked on a beach. I attempted the tried and true approach of punching plants only to figure out that you need to target harvestable objects directly. Picking enough of these leveled up my gathering skill and caused a blue shadow monster to appear. Turns out it wasn't so sinister, rather quite helpful as it gave me a tip of what to do first. I proceeded to ignore that advice and engaged in fisticuffs with the first enemy I could find. While I am not hungry quite yet, my hunger meter in the lower left corner isn't going to stay full forever. Upon vanquishing my enemies, I eagerly searched for my spoils of war only to find fibers, which did not look appetizing. The blue flame appeared again sometime later, giving me the same advice. Quite tenacious, really. Naturally, I ignored it once again to figure out how to craft some basic tools. Apparently, I need rope, which looks like it is craftable from the materials icon using the fibers we picked up from our fallen foes. I see what you did there. Armed with the stone axe and pickaxe I just crafted, I ran towards an interesting landmark where I saw a skeleton patrolling around. I figured I probably wasn't ready for that engagement without a true weapon, so I backed off. I spent the night cutting trees and finally made a campfire to keep warm. Not because the blue flame asked me to, even though it seems to eerily hover around me, spying on me all the time. I ate some blueberries hoping to recover some health, but eating any old food doesn't seem to have any healing properties. No matter, I continued cutting more wood so that I could finally craft a flimsy club. Not the greatest of weaponry, but probably enough to take on a single skeleton. The following morning, I ran back to where I found the skeleton and engaged it. Combat seems very straightforward. Dodged some attacks and even blocked a hit. I was feeling pretty confident when suddenly from my left side, I was attacked by another skeleton. I continued to dodge, block, and press my attack when I could until my shield broke, blocking one too many attacks. I got a bit reckless trying to DPS them down quickly, but I overestimated them and they gained the upper hand. I got knocked down and took a bunch more damage, barely making my escape. Clearly, I underestimated finding multiple enemies with the weak gear. As I ran for my life, I decided the best strategy was to probably tech up a bit. After all, this game is all about growing your tribe, so let's do that. Finally, I decided it was time to listen to the blue flame. I placed a campfire blueprint at the location I'd settled my village and used the materials I had towards its construction. I gathered more wood and used the search area feature to make locating all the drop sticks easier to spot. Cutting all these trees by myself is quite grindy. So much so, I think it is on purpose to incentivize getting your tribespeople to do the work for you. I completed the campfire, and by accessing the finished structure, I was able to build an upgrade to make the fire permanent. I gathered a whole bunch of stone and applied it to the campfire to complete the upgrade. I started a fire to keep myself warm and accessed the campfire once again to see what other upgrades I could do now. Turns out I had two options. I chose to initially build the barbecue so I could perhaps cook the food I had foraged. So I immediately began the resource collection process all over again. But before finishing, I decided to also put down the blueprint for the rain collector. My water had run out, and unlike food, I didn't see any other way to get water at this point. When a structure is placed on top of uneven terrain, you are required to level it out first before the blueprint appears. Since the rain collector requires long sticks and you cannot carry those in your inventory, I had to carry one over one at a time, which was a bit grueling. I repeated this process until I placed my last one and began to build the blueprint. And then I apparently smashed my finger while swinging my hammer, losing a bit of health, which equated to about half the health I had left, so not good. Fortunately, I finished it without incident and gained access to free water. I was getting a bit hungry, so I ate some magic mushrooms and the world got a bit funky. Then I spoke to the blue flame and it told me to build a shelter. I wandered around a bit till the effects wore off. Once my senses returned, I laid down my shelter, leveled the terrain, took a bit of an intermission to forage for berries and flax, and returned to finish up the barbecue with the rope I crafted from said flax. Fortunately, I finished the build without slamming another finger, as I think that would have sadly killed me, which would be a rather humiliating death. And when trying to figure out which food I could place in the barbecue, I accidentally ate the spoiling mussels on my toolbar, which, word to the wise, don't eat bad food, especially when low on health. You are feeling better. That's one way to look at it. So yeah, about that embarrassing death. So upon respawning, you can either sacrifice a villager to return to full strength, or you can be reborn and come back weaker. As there is no one to sacrifice, looks like I shall be reborn. And look at that, back at the boat. After a leisurely stroll along the beach, I arrived back at my camp and picked up all my stuff from where the old me had perished by mussels. I had a lot of stuff in my inventory, so that took a little while. While at least I don't have to worry about hammering anymore. As it turns out, some structures are built in phases. The material I had applied built the structural support, and now the second phase of building would add the roof of the shelter. This required some rope and bark, so I applied the materials to the blueprint and completed the construction. A pop-up displayed letting me know I can assign villagers to the shelter as they'll need housing. But for now, this is for me. Well-earned rest. And would you look at that, my health recovers while sleeping. If only I had known sooner. The healing rate doesn't seem too fast though, so probably not the best way to do it. But any progress is progress. Afterwards, I consulted the blue flame to see what my next task should be, and finally, we are on our way to recruit some new villagers. I plopped down my Eye of Odin and began to gather resources for the build. Like the shelter, this required another build phase. The second phase required large stone, which, like the long sticks, cannot be carried in your inventory, so I hauled those over one at a time. And there we are, the last one. In order for the gods to call the villagers, I need to place some Jotun blood in the shrine, which can be found around the world and mined. I needed 5 of them to gain a villager, but before I could do so, night came upon me, so I returned home to get some sleep, when suddenly a foreboding message popped up. Apparently your village is not safe from threat. I was under attack and they seemed to be focusing on my structures. Because of that, I was able to dispatch them with ease as I wasn't targeted myself. After finishing off the last one, the blood moon faded away and I set out to repair the damage they caused. Repairing is much like building, in which you need to apply resources and use the hammer once they are all fed. Following that slight distraction, I got my remaining Jotun blood and placed them in the Eye of Odin. Upon confirming, I was granted 2 options to select my first villager. All villagers have different stats, and depending on those characteristics, they will be better suited for a particular job over another. You can only see the first 2 of all 5 characteristics they possess. As harvesting wood has been my biggest bottleneck thus far, I decided to pick Toke, as one of his skills makes him more proficient at gathering wood at the cost of needing to eat more food. Picking my villager started a 10-minute timer before he arrived. In preparation of Toke's arrival, I decided to build a woodcutter's pit, which would allow me to assign a villager the task of cutting wood, which cannot happen a moment too soon, as I'm eager to offload that work onto someone else. While looking at some fish bait as a means of increasing my food production, Toke finally arrived. I found him picking up a long stick, and when villagers first spawn, they are automatically assigned to the role of builder by default, which means if you have any unfinished blueprints, they will start helping you to place resources and build, hence the long stick he grabbed, which is fine by me as the woodcutter's pit is not yet finished. I took a moment to examine his stats and to finally see all of his traits. Looks like our boy is more immune to illnesses, so we can give him all the spoiled muscles, I guess. He's also clumsy with stone, an athlete with better stamina, but more thirst, and he is a battle-scarred veteran, increasing his health. Anyways, back to work. Together we hammered away at the structure, completing it in half the time. And after we finished it, I quickly assigned him the role of woodcutter. Now go forth and get me some wood. Chop chop. Since I got myself another 5 Jotun blood, time to get another villager. Arn has an interesting ability to boost crop yields, which sounded amazing. Unfortunately, I did not know at this point that farming would be locked out from the demo. Whoops. As I have been building, I've been able to unlock some additional buildings. Structures have prerequisites that you must meet before building a more advanced version. Right now, the only prerequisites seem to be building the primitive variant first, though time will tell if there are any other requirements, like population of the tribe, for example. Because poor Toke is homeless, I decided to give him shelter I had been using, and with our next villager on the way, set down another shelter to give him some housing once he arrives. While getting another villager is amazing, that does mean that there will be another mouth to feed, and so I set out to try fishing for the first time, with the bait I had made earlier. Unfortunately, it was a bit tricky fishing at night as it was too hard to see the pole. Morning had come, and close to starvation, still hadn't caught a fish, and Arn had just arrived. And with the coming of Arn, I finally caught my first fish. But before I could situate Arn, I had to solve my hunger issue, in that I was about to starve. I searched through the barbecue, hoping to figure out how to cook my fish. Apparently that didn't seem possible, at least with this campfire. So I exited and frantically went on the search for food I could forage to satiate my hunger. I found some mussels, and with my health depleting from starvation, I ran back to the fire to see if I could cook those up. Nope, didn't look like it. Desperate, I rolled the dice, not knowing if raw food could kill me anyway, and ate the raw sea bass. And it looks like I had nothing to fear. My health stopped dropping, and I didn't take a hit from my already low hit points. Turns out I had been a big dummy this whole time, not knowing I could eat raw fish without health penalty. Well, the more you learn. Since Toke was busy cutting trees, I decided to borrow his shelter during the daylight hours to try and recover a bit of health. God knows I don't want another splinter or spoiled food to finish me off. And wow, the health recovery during sleep is mighty slow. I continued sleeping to get my health to a more comfortable level while I watched Arn finish the other shelter with one eye open. Eventually I got bored just laying there and investigated the campfire and found some recipes there of what I could make. As of now, I am only limited to grilled vegetables, many of which I hadn't seen yet. Well, I had a new mission, but first, need some more health. Feeling a bit safer from splinters, I began to carry out my mission. making a gatherer's pit. It would seem keeping up with food collection on my own is too much, so assigning Arn to the task to help me out should go a long way towards keeping us all alive. As is customary, I leveled out the terrain, and around what felt like lunchtime, I went to fishing, which I finally got the hang of it. Basically, look for the jerk on the line and immediately pull. I returned to work, and with Arn's assistance, we built the gatherer's pit. I gave Arn the task of gathering food. Speaking of food, since Took has been around for the longest, I gave him my other fish so he wouldn't go hungry. I returned to the shore to gather some more fish, and after getting enough, I examined my campfire and decided to add a cover expansion to protect it against rain. By nightfall, I finished building the fire cover all by myself. Now that Arn is collecting food, I am now the sole builder. In the light of the next day, I set out to work on some defenses. I wasn't sure when the next blood moon would come, and I wanted to start preparing. I placed down some flimsy fences and got to thinking about Arn. Maybe he could take a break from food to help me out a bit. I always spoke to him and learned under the issues tab that he was unable to find any vegetables or fruit without adding a foraging marker. Well, Toke doesn't need any marker to find trees, so perhaps Arn just wasn't good at foraging. As a result, I re-enlisted him as a builder by firing him from the foraging gig. I returned to placing all the fences so Arn could retrieve all the resources. As it happens, I was right to prepare for the blood moon. That very night, they came again. And this time, I had my buddies helping out. Perhaps since I felt an overriding sense of protection for my villagers, I took one too many hits in their defense and eroded most of the hit points I had recovered through sleeping. Following the blood moon event, I returned to placing more fences now that I knew for sure they'll be a constant threat. And I returned to the shelter to recuperate some lost health. I stayed there for a while, and after getting up, I gave Arn my old flimsy club. If I wanted us to survive the next blood moon, we'd all need to have weapons. Since Took is my best combative villager, I gave him a slightly better weapon, the simple spiked club. Eventually, I'll need to arm everyone with that weapon, as that is the best I can make for now. Because I fired Arn from foraging duty, it was back to me to take on the task, and so I went along the beach and picked up a bunch of mussels. And while doing that, made the executive decision to recruit a new villager to help me with this. And by help, I mean to do it entirely for me. I grabbed some sticks that Took had harvested, thanks champ, and crafted myself a new stone pickaxe so that I could gather some more Jotun blood. I placed those into the Eye of Odin and selected Astrid as she has the forager's instinct, and perhaps she won't need the foraging marker and have the instinct of finding the food all by herself. Nope, turns out that instinct is for naught. Looks like I was going to be forced to place down a marker or two. But in the meantime, I gathered some fish, as none of my food collectors have gathered any food thus far. I gave Took one of my own fish and set out to forage and find some good spots for Astrid. This seems like a good spot with some berries. Plop, hammer. On the return trip, I collected some more mussels and placed an additional marker in this area too. I foraged for a bunch more mussels and returned to the village and gave Took his share. And also a stone axe, as he had broken his and could no longer collect wood. We got another shelter online for Astrid, and I had another shelter nearly complete for the next villager. I gave Astrid her share of mussels and also a spiked club for combat. I tracked down Arn to give him his share of mussels, only to find he had nearly 2 stacks of berries. Apparently, Arn has been holding out on us. Well, I'll keep the mussels for myself then. I'll still give him a spiked club for the blood moon, but I'll need to keep an eye out on Mr. Sticky Fingers. That evening, I fired up the campfire to start cooking all the food Astrid had collected. Apparently, the foraging markers were the key to success, and now we are swimming in food. I'll eventually need to recruit a villager to do the cooking, but for now, I can be the tribe's resident chef. I ate one of the cooked onions, and lo and behold, I recovered some health. There we go. Certain foods have the healing power. Good to know. I continue to cook through the night, making a variety of foods and putting some on the shelf for others to grab at their leisure. At least that's the theory. More Jotun blood, another villager. Neither villager had a clear-cut rule, so I chose Inga, who had good stamina and is good all around in coastal areas where we have happened to have settled. While waiting for her arrival, I set up some more fencing and a gate so as not to cut off Took from gathering wood. My next goal was to improve what we had already built, mainly Took's woodcutter's pit, but I needed to build the workshop to unlock the upgrade. But in order to do that, I needed to build a stonecutter's pit first. So that's what I did, and I hoped one of Inga's hidden skills would be related to stone. Arn and I continued to build, and I took a little break to check out the barbecue shelf, and saw that villagers had been taking them to eat. No more hunting each of them down to give them food personally. Having the stonecutter's pit, I was finally able to place a workshop pit. Arn and I set out to level the terrain and start the build. I left the task to Arn to check on Astrid's progress, and wow, she's gathered a ton of food. Excellent work. That night I strolled around looking for more flax as I needed a bunch of rope. But while doing so, I managed to find some excellent foraging areas, so I dropped down some more markers for Astrid. As we expand and get more foragers like Astrid, these extra markers will be important. After returning home with the rope, I finished the workshop bit and took a look at the workshop. It looks like you can assign villagers to craft a bunch of tools, weapons, and basic resources like rope. We'll get this village automated so I can do whatever I'd like. Perfect. Finally finished the gate and watched the villager go right through it. Neat. As our village has grown some, I made another rain collector to keep up with everyone's water needs. Next, I started to go around and upgrade all my production buildings. Arn would need to place all the resources and build, but it's a first step. Because Ingrid has filled up the stone storage in the pit, I decided to reallocate her to cook duty for the time being. In the campfire, I was able to assign her cooking tasks by clicking on Add Task and selecting the food and quantity to be cooked. You can add more than one task to queue up several jobs. With all the building I've been doing, I unlocked the wooden altar, which when built, will allow villagers to gather around and socialize, which should help with their moods. Eager to get another villager, I left Arn to build and went out for some more Jotun blood. I ended up choosing Leaf, as he is another wood gatherer, and with all the expansions we are doing, Took could use some help. I also decided to place down a warehouse, so that I could store more resources for building more stuff. It's pretty big, so I found an open area on the edge of the tiny village to place it. It also looks like I have unlocked the next tier of tools, which will allow us to cut down larger trees and stone to build bigger and better things. Our next recruit finally arrived, and I took a look at his stats and learned that he could also double as a craftsman in the workshop. But since we don't have enough material stored, he can cut trees for now. I crafted some better tools and gave a better axe to Leaf and Took. At this point, I've unlocked even more buildings, which will require even more villagers to operate. We're starting to snowball and get a real community going. Ultimately, I decided to go with the fisherman's hut, as we'll need more food to keep up with the growing tribe. And there. That should do it. That night we had another blood moon appear, and it seems the fences helped out as they were distracted by those, allowing me to easily take them out. After they were dispatched, I went around and repaired the damage to the fences. I grabbed several sticks from the woodcutter's pit to make the repairs. And to replenish my stock of bones for spiked clubs, I harvested the fallen foes from the blood moon. Just before the morning, I chose an upgrade for the workshop pit, as we'll need that to unlock some additional things. The next day, I went out exploring, and after returning to the village to admire my work, the demo ended. Well, that was a lot of fun. We built a lot, killed some enemies, died once, and overall, I had a pretty good time. It was definitely much grindier in the beginning, but after getting some villagers to help out, it became much more enjoyable. The game really is all about growing your tribe and managing them. So if you're doing everything yourself, you're doing it wrong. You won't survive long without their help, and once you enlist them, you will start to grow rapidly. Not only that, you can free up your time to start doing what you like best in the game. There will be another open demo from the 10th to the 17th of June. I recommend giving it a shot for a few hours to see if you like the game. I hope you all had fun, as I certainly did. If you found your time here enjoyable, please drop a comment, like, and subscribe, as it really helps us out. And I'd like to thank our wonderful Patreons whose support has been very vital to our growth. On that note, this is Eerie Knight signing off. See you all in the next one.
Well, what's happening?
Oh, it's done.
Ah, it must only have like a certain amount of time.
Oh.
Surprise!